Hi, I'm Nick Schulz. My guest today is John Rowe, the CEO and chairman of Exelon Corporation. John, thanks so much for taking some time to talk to me.
Thank you.
Exelon is one of the largest electric and gas utility companies in the United States, and I want to talk to you today about something you've been thinking a lot about and talking about lately, which is natural gas. Now, Exelon's known primarily as a nuclear company. Tell me, and later today you're going to be talking about natural gas and its importance to the country and the economy, but can you tell me a little bit about how important natural gas is to your company right now and how important you think it'll be in 5 years, 10 years?
Well, natural gas fuels only a small part of our electricity business right now. But the price of natural gas sets the price for electricity in a number of the competitive regions in the country. So the output of my nuclear plants has greater or lesser value depending in part on the price of natural gas. When we had that peak in 2008 and gas was at 12 or 14, electricity was selling very nicely at wholesale and Exelon stock was at 90. Today with natural gas at about $4, Exelon stock is about 40, and that correlation is almost perfect. There's a little lag in it, but natural gas is important to us partly because it sets the price of what we sell, and partly because on the margin it's the probable source of supply for whatever new generation we might build.
And that's because of the economics of it, of other alternatives, whether it's new nuclear or renewables? Or?
Yes, we think natural gas is 50 or 60% the price of new nuclear on the margin. It's cheaper and much cleaner than new coal, even with experimental carbon sequestrations. It's cheaper than wind and much cheaper than solar. So natural gas is queen right now, and the only issue is how long will she be kind?
And how long do you think she will be?
At least a decade, maybe two. We are looking at forecasts from all of the independent research groups that we can hire that say natural gas is now sufficiently plentiful so that it will stay relatively cheap for decades. Most supply curves that you get from people who make these forecasts for a living have gas prices almost flat in real terms for at least 1 decade and often for 2.
Now, there's been there are technological questions where it comes to the supply of natural gas, and there are also political questions. And lately, there's been a lot of attention paid to what's called fracking, hydraulic fracturing, which is the process by which natural gas is retrieved from the ground in some instances, not in all. I imagine if I asked a natural gas producer, I might get one response, but as a consumer and somebody who's looking at natural gas being more prominent both for his company and for the country, what's your take on the sort of controversy around the fracking process?
Well, my take is that we should pay attention to the environmental issues raised by this new technology, but we shouldn't think those environmental issues will make the technology either uneconomic or unuseful. We need to watch, we need to learn. There may be a need for some regulatory supervision that doesn't exist today. But fundamentally, shale gas, as the product of fracturing the rock is called, increases the U.S. natural gas reserves by something like 30 to 50%. For me as a seller of power, that's bad news. For the American consumer, it's good news. And for the American competitive position abroad, it's very good news indeed. So yes, let's look at what a reasonable regulatory structure might be, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Okay. I want to talk to you about America's competitive position in just a minute, but I also want to ask you about, you described natural gas as a bridge technology to a cleaner future, and part of that is based on the fact that natural gas emits much less carbon than alternatives, especially coal. I ask this as say a potential investor. I hear you describe natural gas as a bridge technology that implies future. How important is natural gas going to be over the next 10, 20 years, and what's on the other side of that bridge?
Well, it's going to be the dominant source of energy for electricity on the margin for that, for at least the first 10 and almost surely for 20. It simply is more economic than all the alternatives and is likely to be so for nearly every year within a 20-year period. Now, after that, everybody's guess at what
Right.
the world looks like 30 years from now is pretty good, when most of us didn't predict North Africa even 6 months ago. So obviously I don't either. I think there are fundamentally two alternatives. One is that in 30 years we start finding a lot more nuclear power to be economic again. And the other is that packages of wind, solar, and natural gas become the option of choice. You know, everyone likes to pick a technology and say, this is the winner. And if I were to pick one for 3 decades out, I would pick nuclear. Surprise, surprise, I'm the nuclear guy. But for the first time in my life, I see at least an alternative paradigm that begins to seem real to me. And it could be wind, which will become more economic over that period, not because it's going to get that much cheaper, but because other things continue to get more expensive. Solar, which is becoming more economic. Wind tends to like to run at night. It's very unreliable capacity. Solar tends to want to run in the day. It doesn't do very well at night. But it's possible that you end up with an economic combination where the wind and solar run a lot because they're low carbon or no carbon, and natural gas, which is low carbon, sort of bonds the two of them together in an efficient supply. Up until 2 or 3 years ago, I simply could see no alternative to a major nuclear resurgence at some time. But as we look at a world with relatively slow growth in demand for electricity, wind that actually works, solar that has gone from 40 cents a kilowatt hour to something like 20, you do begin to envision that there may be a more complex technology base out there that might be economically competitive with nuclear and socially thought to be preferable in some ways. I just don't have a very clear picture of how that one breaks.
Okay, because that helps. It helps me understand at least the. You commented about how renewables currently aren't really economic, and yet Exelon's made a major investment in John Deere renewables. Could you just talk about that investment and how that fits into your whole portfolio?
There are 2 reasons why we bought John Deere Wind, which of course is now Exelon Wind. I doubt we've got all the yellow and green out, but as a fellow who came from a farm in Wisconsin, I wouldn't want to anyway. The first was betting on a political market. We think that regardless of the speeches I give, many states, perhaps even the federal government, will continue to have renewable energy portfolio standards or clean energy portfolio standards. If we have to buy it, we want to sell it too. And in the longer term, we do see a growing role for wind based on the economics. I mean, right now, the wind that's out there, many thousands of megawatts, is all driven by state requirements. It's always a case of an unwilling buyer and a very willing seller. But I don't think the wind stays that way. I think it does become an economic part of our electric supply down the road.
Okay, final question for you, which gets to this question about U.S. competitiveness and the U.S. position in the sort of global energy market. There was a period of time when the U.S. was a major energy power and exporter with oil, and with states like California, Texas, Oklahoma, obviously even Pennsylvania in its early days. Do you envision with natural gas a return to that sort of energy preeminence, where you have states, say it's New York or Pennsylvania, even West Virginia, that are major exporters of natural gas to LNG terminals in China, say? How do you see that changing?
I doubt if it becomes major. I think it's quite realistic that we could be a minor global exporter of gas. The price differential between LNG in Japan and LNG in the United States has generally been quite large. But I think the shale gas that underlies Pennsylvania is a huge boon to an industrial state that can use a boon, and as a major economic participant in Pennsylvania, that's a good thing from my point of view. I'd like to see Illinois find some too. I think it creates some export market potential. But I think its larger potential is being a source of economical generation. I mean, right now they can probably build a new nuclear plant in China for half the price we can build one. They have such immense needs for electricity, such large pollution problems with their coal fleet, that building lots of nuclear plants probably makes sense there. But we can't build the same plant for the same price here. On the other hand, if we can build gas-fired generation out of machines that are made in the US or Europe, and put them together here and make our own electricity cleaner and cheaper, at least cheaper than the alternatives, then we have a competitive edge for at least the US service industry, and hopefully for the US manufacturing industry too. I mean, I'm a hardware guy at heart. Service economies are all very nice, but I think we have to make some things in this country to compete. We can't compete with China or India across the entire scale of manufacturing. That would be a delusion. But we need to pick high-value things we can manufacture in this country, try to keep some base of making things and not just doing services. And I think what appears to be a long period of low-priced natural gas does create some competitive opportunities for the U.S. in that regard.
Okay, my guest today is John Rowe, the chairman and CEO of Exelon Corporation. John, thanks so much for taking time to talk to me.
Appreciate it.